Hello there, and thanks for joining me today for Geezes of Gear episode 253. I just finished recording the podcast about probably 30 minutes ago. And again, thank you so much to our sponsors on this podcast. Today was Ultimate Support, Act Entertainment, and GearSource. And so I recorded this with Paul Vincent. Paul was in the industry since the mid 70s and has such a great story to tell. I didn't know that his parents were both in acting. And I also didn't know that it took him 10 years to sell his business. So hearing his multiple stories discussing how complicated that was, how difficult it was to sell a business, and then ultimately dealing with private equity companies, what that's like, sort of the good and bad of private equity, and just a story from somebody who is a very good storyteller. So I hope you like it.
Hello, and thanks for coming to episode number 253 of Geezers of Gear. Today's podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Support Systems, a part of Act Entertainment. For over 45 years, Ultimate Support Systems has provided musicians with unique support solutions, just like this one that's holding my microphone right now that I happen to love. These are crafted with unparalleled innovation and quality. Ultimate Support has always been determined to invent, design, and manufacture the smartest support solutions and musical accessories in the music industry. And that commitment to innovation continues to this day. Be sure to visit ultimatesupport.com, where you can learn all about their solutions for content creators, touring musicians, recording studios, and more. From acoustic treatment to best-in-class speaker stands, Ultimate Support has premium accessories that you can count on. And today's podcast is also brought to you by GearSource. Founded in 2002 with an ambitious mission to support live events businesses buy and sell gear globally. Since that time, the company has transacted in more than 100 countries, selling $250 million in sound, lighting, staging, and video gear. GearSource continues to evolve the platform for massive global growth, enabling localized currencies, payments held in escrow to protect buyers and sellers, AI-powered logistics behind a new global logistics brand, and much more. Throughout 2024 and beyond, the company will continue to grow its toolbox for the benefit of users worldwide. So why not take full control over your gear with a visit to gearsource.com today? Hello and welcome back to Geezers of Gear. Believe it or not, I don't actually have much to talk about today on our intro. I will tell you that one of our great sponsors, Row Visual, is involved with the, I would call it soccer, but all of you smarter than me people would call it football, but UEFA, which stands for, I'm not sure what the U is, but I'm sure it's European Football Association. The U might be United. I don't know what it is, but UEFA 2024 live broadcasts have been upgraded by using Row Visual. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. I was looking through the article trying to figure out exactly what their part was, but it looks like a lot of really cool stuff is going on. Row has provided not only the backdrop, but I believe also the floor, if I have this correct. But anyways, it looks cool. It's there's a shiny floor, a shiny LED floor, and just a lot going on. So yeah, good on Row. I mean, this is beautiful. I actually thought that this broadcast was being done with all these buildings and stuff in the background. It's just so well done when you look at the images. Like it's sort of a surround LED screen that looks like a cityscape, at different parts of the day, depending on when the broadcast is. And then the floor might show things like what teams are playing, a score, whatever. Just super cool. So check that out if you can. I think Row has it published on their website. Maybe Sarah can provide a link to it in the final recording. And of course, back to my favorite topic, which is currently AI. There's a lot going on. I didn't actually grab any articles to talk to you about today, but one that I've been following, Google has something, and I already forget what it's called. It's called like something DJ or music something. I apologize. I read it yesterday and I meant to keep a copy of the article, but it's basically DJ software that it's sort of like DJ version of Muzak, where you can just put in a few things like I want something that's 108 beats per minute. I want it to be sort of a hip hop, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know what terms these DJs are using to explain their music these days, but basically you put in the vibe that you want, what instruments you might want. Like, I want bass, drums, and piano in this song, and it'll spit out a beat for you that has all of those elements in it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And then there's another version of it where you can tweak it, where you can slide faders, more hip hop, more bass, more drums, and it'll, the AI will tweak that response back. So, again, like there's all kinds of screaming going on over this new Google product, which I guess is part of their new Gemini AI system. But it's not meant to replace DJs. I guess at the lowest end, if you talk about your lowest level DJ, somebody who's in a car dealership DJing because they're having a 4th of July sale in the dealership, and he's just putting together a mix of songs, that can easily be replaced. But that could also be replaced by, Apple Music or Spotify, or any of the systems have a setup that will mix music for you and put together like songs and stuff. This is more than that. Like, this actually creates songs based on what it is you want. So this is geared more towards like performance DJs who are going out and doing festivals and stuff like that. I don't think it's all the way there yet for the real professional folks, guys, girls. But it does seem promising. And, so I actually saw, I think it was CNET had a video of a New York DJ called, I believe it's Naz or Paz or something. Sorry if everyone's laughing at me right now. Not a DJ guy. But anyways, he was reviewing the system, and he had some very high grades on certain parts of it and then just beat the hell out of it on other parts. But the system claims not to be trying to replace DJs necessarily, but to augment and to support DJs and make their job easier, allow them to create music more, and leave sort of the boring stuff to the AI. However, it oversteps that because it's actually creating the music too. So I don't know if that's what it intends to do or if that's what its main function is, but it is creating music, and it is putting together these beats and these mixes. And so very interesting. And really, that's all I got for you on AI stuff today. I just didn't do a lot of research. It's been a crazy busy week. And so there you have it. So today's guest is someone that I think most of you will know. Paul Vincent is the founder, or was the founder in 1978, of Vincent Lighting Systems, which sells and services theater, television, and architectural lighting and rigging systems and related equipment. I'm sure most of you know that. Vincent Lighting Systems also provides an extensive rental inventory, production and rigging services, and in-stock theatrical supplies. Paul sold the company to Cleveland-based Canterbury Capital in 2017 and retired from the business in 2019 after a successful transition to their new leadership. Paul has presented numerous lighting, management, and business workshops and seminars over the past 45 years to students and users, designers, architects, electrical engineers, and electrical contractors. So please join me and welcome Paul Vincent to the podcast. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Marcel. How you been?
I've been okay. I've been I'm up in Canada, so I'm freezing to death, and it's very weird. Like June 20th, we got snow. We had snow on the ground. Like it wasn't 2 feet of snow. It was maybe a quarter of an inch of snow, but we had big flakes of snow blowing through the air and landing on the ground and surviving. And it's been a weird year in Canada. I wasn't here. I just got here early June, but um, they didn't really have a very cold winter at all. Skiing was terrible. They didn't get a lot of snow until March. Like March is basically when winter started, and they just got piles of snow and cold weather and everything else. So it's kind of delayed the start of summer too, which is very interesting. But I grew up here, so I know
Yeah.
that don't get too friendly with the weather because it's about to change very dramatically. So like right now, this morning we had a fire going because it was in the high 30s, and tomorrow it's I think going up to 78 or something. So
hmm
just weird
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I'm on the southern shore of Lake Erie in
Ah,
Ashtabula, Ohio, which is a
yeah.
small city about 50 miles from Cleveland. I grew
Okay.
up in Cleveland originally, and so I've been on the shores of Lake Erie really my whole life. And today it's
Wow.
going up to 88, and we're supposed to, I'm hoping, we got a lot in the garden, so I'm hoping that it rains later. Then I
Yeah.
don't have to water.
Well, so that's the other thing up here is, there's everyone's complaining. It's just been raining all the time because literally pretty much every day, almost every day, we're getting some rain.
Yeah,
And it's going to start going away over the next few days. But what that's done is it's pretty much completely negated forest fires for this summer. And so some summers I'll come up here and you got to leave your windows closed because there's just so much smoke outside.
yeah,
Not to mention the damage to houses or property or whatever, but I'm just talking from a comfort level, breathing this air in, it's not good at all. And so this year I think we're going to have a pretty, knock on my wooden head, a mild fire season, hopefully as a result of all the rain.
Well, we're
Pardon me,
familiar
but
with your fires because we get the smoke coming down here.
yeah. Was it last year or the year before where like Chicago had to close the airport and stuff?
Right, right. It was,
Yeah.
I think, both years.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, and the funny thing was like last year, we didn't get any of it here. The year
hmm
before was pretty bad up here, but
Yeah,
last year it just kind of blew right by us to you guys, and New York was a real problem even.
yes,
So yeah, it's
yes,
crazy.
yes.
I don't know. We were right before we started uh, talking or recording anyways, you were telling me about a book you're reading right now about climate change or whatever everyone wants to call it this week. But what is that book?
It's called The Ministry for the Future, and
Okay.
it's set probably between 10 and 20 years from now. And
Okay.
the agency is part of the UN, and it's located in Switzerland, in Zurich,
Yeah.
and it's about the woman who runs the agency, and then it's about the topic is mostly about climate change,
Okay.
and climate change shouldn't be confused with global warming. It's true that the globe is warming, at least that's what I think, um,
Yeah.
and ocean temperatures are rising. But climate change can also be, as you said, forest fires because people did not, the native peoples were not allowed to continue to burn the brush that needed to be burned. And now they've started, doing some of that. And the
Yeah.
question that is posed in this book is it too late or is it not too late? And I'm on chapter 78, and
Ooh.
and we don't know yet. We know that it's bad. For example, 20 million people die in India because of heat exposure, old, young, a wide range. And one of the protagonists, or maybe hero, I don't know yet, we'll see, in the book, is a young American who went to India in order to help people, and he sees everyone dying around him, and the power is out for the entire country. 20
Mm.
million people ultimately die, and somehow he's the only person that survives in his town.
Go figure.
And he ends up actually in Switzerland, and he has this encounter with the head of this agency. It's pretty fascinating.
Wow. How'd you find this book?
Seth Godin, who does a blog, and I
Yeah.
read his blog most every day.
Some days it's really weird, and some days it's just so spot on, and I share it with my team in my
Yeah.
company. A side story. So I probably started following Seth Godin, I'm guessing before you did, just because I started following him in like 2000.
Oh,
And so a very funny story. So when I left the last company where I was sort of employed, I was a minority owner, but there was a board and a management team
mm-hmm.
above me. But when I left that company in 2001, I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew I was going to do something completely on my own. Finally, I was just too entrepreneurial to be inside these companies. And I also didn't want to just go work for another moving light manufacturer, which I had done for 20 years.
Right.
And so I don't even remember how I learned about it, but there was this CD set with a really cheesy name, like Making Money on the Internet or something like that. And it was Seth Godin.
Oh.
And I think by that time I had been reading his newsletter because he had an email list and a newsletter. And I think I was on his newsletter, and it announced this CD set. And I bought the CD set. And at the time I lived on a golf course, and I had a pool in my backyard. So I'd sit out there and listen to these CDs. And I went through it twice. And so really what I knew was that I wanted an internet company. I wanted a remote company, and remote companies didn't exist at the time.
Right.
But by then I had a place up in Canada where I'm from, and I lived in Florida where my business was based. But I wanted to be able to be back and forth without it causing any disruption whatsoever. And in my mind, I was starting to create a scenario for a remote internet company, basically.
Yeah.
And so listen to the CD set, and he tells this story of a particular bird in Africa that rhinos or hippopotamuses, I can't remember which one it was, but one of them sits in the water with their mouth open. The bird flies in their mouth and eats all of the stuff out of its teeth and cleans its teeth. And the moral of the story is, the hippo ended up with clean teeth, and the bird lived off of that food, out of his teeth, as disgusting as that is. But what he was suggesting is what you need to do is create a business where you're taking a very small amount from lots of different sources, but something that's not a meaningful amount from them. And that becomes your food. And to them, it's meaningless, but you're providing them a service, which is quite generic as an idea. But immediately I saw that as manufacturers in our industry have a problem that many of them don't even see coming yet. And part of this was based on my concept that technology was suddenly moving much more quickly than it had been in the past, especially automated lighting. Automated lighting was now going from version 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 very quickly, because you were on the painful side of it where you had to keep up with this in your inventory.
Yes.
And, but manufacturers and distributors that I had worked for and that I was very knowledgeable about were not recognizing this pattern. And what was happening is inventory was getting pushed further back on their shelf while the new models were coming in and going in front of it. Because what do sales teams love to do? They love to call their customers and say, we've got a new thing, it's got a new widget and new features. Salespeople, and I've been one all my life, are generally pretty lazy. We'll go to the lowest hanging fruit. We'll use the easiest pitch we possibly can to get the order. And so that's usually the latest, greatest stuff. It's hard to motivate a sales team to take care of your last year's inventory problems unless you incentivize them and say, I'll pay you all the profit on the sale or something.
Well, at the same time, if you can get a customer to say yes the first time, it's so much easier to get them to continue to say yes, and you can create a lifelong relationship with them.
Well, because now they've gone from a prospect to a customer to a friend, or at least a relationship, right?
Yes.
And I've built a career on relationship selling. I've created relationships with thousands of people, and some of them are very shallow relationships where it's just a transactional relationship. And some of them I go on vacation with these people, like they're
Yeah,
true, just like you. I know you have very deep friendships in the industry, and it's one of the great things about our industry. But
indeed.
but just to finish that story, so I created this concept for what is now GearSource based around manufacturers needing someone to focus on discontinued inventory or B stock inventory, stuff they were sending out on demos. It was coming back and getting pushed back on the shelf again, right? And I saw this on my own inventory control reports in companies that I was managing or working for. And so I knew it was a problem that existed. So I was solving a real problem. And then from there, it sort of developed more into like where rental companies started saying, can you solve this problem for me too? Like get rid of my old stuff. And that is the bulk of our business today, really is rental company, both acquiring inventory and disposing of inventory. Um, that's our biggest market today. But that was
Hmm.
all based on Seth Godin. So it's funny when you bring up his name.
Yeah, he's a pretty interesting guy. I'll just say that.
Yeah. He's definitely colorful,
Hmm.
starting from his presence, big bright red or blue sunglasses. And yeah, but he's so smart. He really
Hmm.
is so smart. He's not everyone's flavor, but I've read most of his books, almost all of his books. I have his latest one, Something Song. I have it sitting in my to be read file, but I'm a huge fan. Like Purple Cow was a great book, uh, and just like again, one of the things that I was really early on when I started GearSource in 2002. I had a permission based email marketing list. Nobody was doing email marketing at the time, hardly anyone, not
Hmm.
no one, but very few companies in our industry were doing email marketing. And so I focused on building that list, which is now, I think, 25,000 people or something on our email market. And we still, to this day, people think email is dead, but GearSource, a big part of our marketing focus really is on our email list and our subscribers and providing good, valuable information to them on a timely basis. So, um,
That
yeah,
doesn't surprise me.
yeah. So you've been retired now for what, 5 years? And I'm
Yeah,
guessing
I sold
retirement
the
is a
company
funny word.
in June of 2017, and then I retired when Bill Grainer came in as the new president on
Yeah.
December 1st of 2018. So I
Oh,
usually say I've been retired since 2019 because it was near the end of the year.
right, right. Fiscal or calendar year
Calendar
2019,
year,
fiscal
correct.
year 2018 or whatever. But no, that's I envy you in a sense. You got out. But at the same time, I'm sure, you've found other things within our industry that you're still involved in. I know that you've been a big uh, guy on boards and stuff like that. Like that's always been a really important part of your life and your journey. Are you still doing a lot of that stuff?
I'm still involved with the Musical Theater Project, which is a nationwide organization, but it's located here in Cleveland. An emeriti board member and an advisor for
Yeah.
them. I am a SCORE volunteer. SCORE is the Service Corps of Retired Executives, a part of the
Oh,
Small
interesting.
Business Administration. And so I volunteer my time to help small businesses improve or to help someone establish a small business primarily in Northeast Ohio area. I have some
Interesting.
specialty work, but most of my customers are here.
So it's like a mentorship program, sort of.
Correct, correct.
That's
And
really interesting.
back in the day, SCORE's been around since 1964, and they've helped, thousands of business owners. We have about 10,000 volunteers in 300 chapters, and I'm part of the Cleveland chapter. And
Wow.
I've done that for 3 years. And before SCORE, I was in a similar position with Business Advisors of Cleveland. Same thing. I was a volunteer mentor or coach, as they called it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't even know
Mhm.
that program existed. That's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
Yeah.
You know, as a business owner who started on my own in my bedroom in my house, building a business and not knowing what the heck I was doing other than I had run other people's businesses for them. But when it's your own and you're responsible for everything from accounting, banking, paying the taxes, paying payroll, you know, etc.,
Yeah,
business development, it's so nice to have access to that kind of a resource. And I had no
indeed.
idea. I didn't look for it either, of course, but
Yeah,
I've hired
it's
lots of
there.
consultants along the way, but
Well,
uh,
it's a free service, always confidential, and so
wow,
I enjoy doing that.
that's really cool. Are you on other boards right now, or those two are
No,
it?
that's now primarily it. I was of course involved with ESTA for many
Yeah,
years. In the earlier days, I was the vice president, and then I became president. And there was a group of us. We created the former presidents. So Glenn Becker, who's not with us anymore, John
yeah,
McGraw, who is still with us, and
yeah,
myself were all presidents. And then our little group included Frank Stewart, who was in theory treasurer for life. That was not the case. And in a way, Eric Magnusson, who was the original secretary, or maybe the
yeah,
second secretary, and during my time he was secretary, we became what we like to call the has-been society. and, and occasionally the new board would ask the three past presidents, along with any other help they could get, to do certain things on behalf of ESTA, to investigate a trade show or things of that nature. And
yeah.
so we did that for several years as well.
Weren't you part of like the earliest foundation of ESTA or
Yes.
whatever? Like I
So,
remember ESTA for me is synonymous with Paul Vincent. You know,
well,
I mean,
I don't know about that, but it should be
yeah,
synonymous with Laurie Rubenstein, who
Lori as
has
well, of
been
course.
was the executive director for many years and did an outstanding job. And then
Hmm.
the three original founders of the Theatrical Dealers Association (TDA) was when it
Yeah,
first started, and that was Bob Dement, who was Laurie's boss at San Diego Stage and Lighting, and then
right.
Bob Cannon at Bash, and
Yeah,
Glenn Becker from Grand Stage. They were the original leaders, if you will. They created the first meeting in Las Vegas. And we were one of 25 founding members of the Theatrical Dealers
wow.
Association. And
Huh.
then about 2 years in, or so, maybe 3 years in, there was a push because standards making was important. And we were approached by larger dealers and manufacturers as well, who wanted to be full-fledged members. We had them as associate members of the TDA, but there was sort of it was sort of like this.
Yeah,
And I wanted, and Lori wanted, and other people, I think rightly, wanted to create an organization that was inclusive. And so we invited manufacturers to be able to join as full members and change the name to ESTA, the Entertainment Services and Technology Association, at that
yeah,
point in time. And that allowed us to bring in a much broader base of support. And ultimately, let's say during my time, I think we grew to 300 members. And then over time, there are close to 600 members, I think now, all based on, work of new volunteers. And the thing that I always loved from the very beginning was that the organization was and is volunteer driven. That's
yeah,
certainly true in standards development as well. It's volunteer driven. And every time we would have a meeting, whatever that meeting was, we really concentrated on let's get the job done in front of us because we're here for 1, 2, or 3 days maybe, and then we won't
yeah,
be. And so
yeah.
let's get it done.
That's also very challenging though when it's all volunteer based because you can't just say, "Hey, spend the next 3 weeks doing this." Bob or Tom or whoever, right? Like, here's your responsibility for the next couple of weeks. Please get it done. Because people can push back and say, no, I've got a meeting, I've got vacation with my family, I've got, this trade show I've got to be at. So life gets in the way, their own business gets in the way. So it can be very frustrating, I'm sure.
It is, but I think that's why when we met, we knew over the next 3 days we better accomplish 3 months worth of work because
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to get people to pay
Yeah.
attention when they get
Yeah.
back to their families, back to their businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I
So,
had Jim Digby on
uh-huh,
I don't know, a few months ago,
yeah,
talking about that, and he said similar things. Like he said, one of the really hard things about a volunteer-run organization is just getting the work done, having enough people with enough available time and hands to be able to get the work done, and it can be very, very challenging. You know, even if it's just copywriting or whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. Somebody has to take ownership and champion that project, and somebody actually has to physically do the work, and it's not
yes.
always easy to do that.
Well, we were
So
fortunate because we had good leadership and we had a good executive director in Lori, and that helped keep people focused. And as we
yeah,
added more things like technical standards, for example, with the organization grew within itself. In other words, we hired Carl Ruling eventually. We hired the right person, as it turns out, Mr. Weber, who put together the policies and procedures. And everybody complained, what, why does it take so long, blah blah blah. Well, he was absolutely right. If you get the policies and procedures in place, and if they're good and they're right, it can become a national standard through ANSI.
yeah,
And that's
hmm,
exactly what happened.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we
So
were lucky.
going back a bit, I
Yeah,
think you said there were something like 25 original founding members in the TDA.
right.
What was the mission at that time?
Well, I think the mission at that time was different, because we sort of had, in the minds of many dealers, not all dealers, but in the minds of many dealers, it was a we versus them, meaning dealers versus manufacturers.
That's what I
And
thought.
we
Yeah,
had to change that thinking. And it didn't work forever. There were a few dealers that still, even to this day, potentially probably look at our becoming an inclusive organization as being negative. In other words, they wanted to
yeah,
see dealers do battle with manufacturers.
yeah,
And my approach was, well, the manufacturers, we need the manufacturers to do the right things, and they need dealers to do the right things. So let's team up together. And
yeah.
to me, that
I
made
like
more
that approach.
sense. Yeah, it
Yeah,
made
no, I
much more
like that
sense.
approach. Well, as soon as you start saying it's us against them, the side with the most guns wins, you know, and
Right,
that's going to be the manufacturers. Now, today, different story. Now there are customers who,
right.
thanks to private equity and all of that, there are customers now who are larger than the manufacturers and swing a big stick. But back in the day, you know, we were talking about a whole bunch of $5 million to $10 million companies fighting against $100 million manufacturers, and it's a tough war to win, you
Yeah,
know,
no,
at
no
that point.
question. The
Well,
landscape
nobody
has
wins.
changed. It's
Yeah,
changed. No
yeah.
question about that. And that's
So
that's healthy.
yeah. So then as you grew into ESTA, you've already sort of said you wanted to bring manufacturers more into it. You wanted to get into creating standards and stuff. So did that become the mission basically as an entire industry based on technical standards and stuff, or what changed going from TDA to ESTA primarily?
Well, I think the largest change was the creation of standards that could be recognized through ANSI,
Yeah.
because that allowed ESTA to be basically the group that focused on standards and worked together with other standards making bodies. Let's face it, USITT, I've been a member of USITT since 1974. USITT has always been in the standards side, but it took the combination of dealers, rental houses, and manufacturers together to start creating national standards and
Yeah.
creating those policies and procedures that are so important to create successful ANSI standards. And you need
Right.
that recognition. That's important. And
Right.
so, really, ESTA became the body, if you will, that created standards on behalf of the entertainment industry.
Right.
And other organizations, you just mentioned one, the Event Safety Group, they do very important work. And I can understand that because I attend many of their meetings. I'm not on the board, I'm not involved directly, I'm a member of the ESA.
Yeah.
And I love the work that they do, and I think it's
Yeah.
very important work. And
It is.
if you own a rental company, how can you not be involved with safety? I mean, you know, we all know that as soon as the word safety comes forward, people's eyes gloss over, and that's sad because
Well,
it's one
and
of
we
the
all
most
also
important
know,
things. Yeah,
yeah, we also know that it's never an issue until it's an issue, right?
right, right, right,
Safety is not a concern for
right.
people until it becomes a concern for all the wrong reasons. One of your staff members gets
Yeah,
hurt or worse, or, a local company that has a problem and it puts them out of business or something like
right,
that. Like, until it becomes a problem for our industry, it's generally not a problem. And, I look at some images of riggers and stuff from the 70s and 80s, and just some of the stuff that we as an industry did back then. Just some of they're funny to look at, but you look at them and you just go, oh my God, I can't believe people did that.
I
And
remember being in an arena, an ice arena in Cincinnati, local 5, stagehands, and I was a student, and so I was jobbing in, and I'm on the top of a 40-foot A-frame ladder being dragged along the ice, and of course they wouldn't let me come down.
oh
Every
my
time you had to
God,
be moved along the truss in order to focus more lights, you had to stay right where you were and just pray that they didn't hit a rut or something happened.
Jesus,
So the things
that's
that we did,
insane.
that was in
Yeah.
1973, 74. So the things that we did, I'm just amazed.
When you say 73 or 74, do you stop for a second and go, that's 50 years? That's 50 years ago. Oh my God.
Well,
You know,
I'm 72 now, so I
yeah.
get
Oh,
it.
wow. Yeah. I thought you were in mid to late 60s still,
No,
but
no.
yeah, well, you're doing well. Um, the whole board thing to me, I'm in awe of people who do it. Whether we're talking about an HOA, a homeowner association or condo association, or we're talking about associations like the ones that we're discussing right now, like industry associations, which are so vitally important. Um, I'm never the guy raising my hand saying, "Please put me on that board," and it's not because I'm lazy. Trust me, I'm not lazy at all. I'm not always a fan of the uh, I don't know whether it's diplomacy or bureaucracy or whatever you want to call it that goes on in these boards. So I will tell you, for the first time in my life, other than within my own companies, I've joined a board, and I was invited to a board. It's a private equity company that's buying other companies, and they invited me to the board. I joined the board, and I'm really enjoying the process, but I will tell you that after the first meeting I had, just because I've always run my own businesses or my own teams, or even when I was an employee, I acted like the owner always, for good and bad reasons, right? And after the first meeting, the CEO of the private equity group came to me and said, Marcel, you've got great ideas, but you need to kind of calm them down a little bit sometimes. Like, you don't want to just suck all the oxygen out of the room and make everybody else feel stupid. You got to do this with a little bit of diplomacy. And I was so embarrassed and so upset with myself. And I talked to so many of my friends saying, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I feel like such a tool. And the second meeting I had with them, they contacted me right after and said, you were amazing. Like, I don't know how we could have this board without you on it at this point. You're so valuable to us. And so it was really, really great to get that positive feedback, because I was so nervous and just like, I just felt like a fish out of water, like just out of place, like a leader in a position that I needed to be a follower, or at least a representative, an equal.
Well, there's a
And
big difference between for-profit companies when you're on the board of a for-profit company like a private equity group,
yeah,
and nonprofits. And in the case of ESTA isn't really a nonprofit. ESTA itself is um, it it doesn't have 501c3 status because it's really a trade association. So it
yeah,
exists for the benefit of its members. Whereas ESTA created the ESTA Foundation originally, and then which is now behind the scenes.
right.
That ultimately became behind the scenes, and that does have 501c3 status and is a full nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
And there's a real difference. I was on the BTS board for a while, but I think they grew weary of me asking too many questions. And so
That happens.
that
That does
happens.
happen.
Yeah,
I
and
do it.
I can understand. And so, and that was not very diplomatic. They were not diplomatic about it. And
Yeah.
so that was troubling to me. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I understand. I understand
Yeah.
that. And there are
Yeah.
times when you have to hold your tongue, and
Yeah.
times when it's smart to ask a question. I thought I was asking a very simple, straightforward question. It turned
Yeah.
out not to be the case. So it is
Yeah.
what it is.
No,
It's a
and
great
again,
organization.
I've had similar situations on this current board experience that I'm going through where I really am holding my thoughts and trying to listen a lot more than I talk and things like that, like stuff that I'm not used to doing in my own company or companies that I've had, but now it's a must and it's working out really nicely. And I'm really learning a lot from listening to other people, believe it or not, and then just finding a way to massage my information into the conversation, like to kind of sneak it in instead of just, here I come. But, like I said, I appreciate very much people like yourself who are so generous and willing to give time and energy and effort towards these really thankless positions where everybody's always yelling at you and mad at you for one reason or another. And like in the case of ESTA, I remember in the early days of ESTA, I was at Martin, and I remember you guys were doing the fog and smoke stuff, and we were one of the biggest probably enemies of that situation at the time because we were doing everything wrong. Like we just didn't know what we were doing. The machines were made in Europe, and the fluid was made by a chemical company, and so, I think we were a bit of an offender in the early days, and we really didn't have the technical people on staff to send to these meetings and to be a real contributor to them. But one of the things that we saw very early on was really just how many battles were going on. And there was still a little bit of manufacturer on this side and dealer on the other side, or technical people on one side and manufacturers on the other side, just trying to hold on to what was theirs. No, please don't take this away from me. But yeah, like again, everyone has experience with condo associations and HOA boards and stuff like that. It is a job I've never volunteered for because I appreciate the people who do it. I know most of them are doing the best they can. Oftentimes it's easy to complain about the jobs they're doing or the decisions they're making, or even some of the things like where the guy next to you is getting his lawn cut for free because he's on the board and I'm paying to get my lawn cut. That's not fair. Well, hey, invest some time in the board then and you might get some perks, So, but
Well,
yeah.
it's interesting when you bring up fog standards, for example. You're right. There was more. It was more cantankerous in those
Yes.
days.
Good
There's no
word.
question about that. But some very good standards were created, and the vast majority of manufacturers, including Martin, were
Yeah.
contributors to creating a good standard. And
Yeah.
so, and that's what I mean by volunteers. Ultimately, even Martin provided good volunteer work in order to
Yeah.
help create good standards.
When I also remember writing a check. And I think when we couldn't contribute smart technical information, we just wrote a check.
You supported the
and
program.
and that was helpful,
Yes.
And so
Yes.
when you have nothing good to say, write a check,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody will be happy.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, that seemed to work for us. So I don't know where to really start, even though we're deep into it. But you actually were one of the people, I think. Oh no, you didn't go to school for like theater
Yes.
or.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did.
I did. My father was an equity actor for 55 years, and my
Wow.
mother was an actress, and they worked together. And they were both teachers. My father was the head of the theater department at Edinburgh State Teachers College back in the day,
Uh
now
huh.
Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania, in
Mm-hmm.
northwestern Pennsylvania, sorry. Um, And so we spent our early days there, and then he became the head of the theater department in Cleveland at a local community college, Cuyahoga Community College, the Western Campus Theater. He
Uh-huh.
ran for many years, and then he retired in 1982, moved to New York, and became a character actor. And he did that until 2002,
Wow.
2003, when he retired and moved to the Actors Fund home, the I like to say the Disneyland of elder care facilities. They are wonderful, and
That is awesome.
they help support behind the scenes actually, and it's a great organization. And he spent his last years there. They had a small little acting troupe. They
Wow.
created shows. He was with Kindred Spirits. There were actors and directors and scenographers and costume designers, the whole range of people from the entertainment industry in Englewood, New Jersey. And so he
And what's
spent,
that facility called again?
it's the Actors Fund home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is cool. And so it's exclusively for people from the business.
For anyone in entertainment.
Wow.
Could be a
Interesting.
technician, it could be a star, it could be, I remember walking down the hallway once and Lynn Redgrave walked right past us, so
Jeez.
it
That's
was a
crazy.
fascinating place to be because they would bring people from Broadway and so on, and they would do presentations, and it was a really, really,
That is
really, and it still
amazing.
is. It's a cool place, a
What a
very cool
great
place.
idea. What
Yeah.
a because as we all know, it's such a, you know, terrible way that most people are treated when it comes down to that part of your life.
Oh, it's a
And
great place.
my mom's in a dementia home and she's in a
Hmm.
really good one in Calgary,
Yeah.
Canada.
Uh-huh.
It's very nice, it's very clean, the staff are all really nice, but there's no theater, there's no there's none of those really cool activities that keep people's brains working. I mean, yes, they bring in a guitar player every once in a while and they'll all sit around and sing nursery rhymes and stuff, but um, I just find that it lacks sort of a central sort of thing that everybody can wrap themselves around and
Hmm.
be excited about when they wake up in the morning. And that really is a cool concept that you're
Yeah,
talking about.
they
Yeah,
created a little touring company. They would go to
that is awesome.
other nursing homes and elder care facilities and do small productions.
Such a great idea.
Say an act or two from Macbeth, or pick
Yeah,
your show. So anyway, I
love
went to
that.
the University of Cincinnati and I got my undergraduate degree in speech and communication. And I was lucky, and I went into the theater department one day, and I tried out for a show. I played Dr. Spivey in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
Nice.
and and I became a technician, and I just fell in love with lighting. And my mentor there was a guy named Steve Carmichael. He and some of his friends had all been to Juilliard and had gone through the program there and had worked at Juilliard, and then came back to Cincinnati. There was a stage manager, Tommy Warner, and his wife, who was a costume designer. And my wife worked for her for a while. This was a whole nice group at UC. And
Nice.
this was in the day before the theater department was merged into the College Conservatory of Music. So most people are familiar with CCM, but back in the day, we were part of ANS, Arts and Sciences. It was just the
Okay.
theater department. We didn't often do musicals, I'll put it that way. And we worked in this really old, Depression era auditorium, Wilson Auditorium, that
Hmm.
was dangerous. And, somehow we all survived. I
Yeah.
remember the assistant technical director fell and came crashing down onto top of a cabinet. He
Oh
managed to
boy.
survive just fine. His name's Jim Houlihan, really good guy.
Yeah.
And he went on to do good things, went to North Carolina School of the Arts and was a teacher there for a while. And Steve went on to eventually move to Colorado, where he taught for a while, and then now he lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So he was
Cool.
very, very important, taught me a, a ton. And
Yeah.
I got my master's degree in theater from University of Cincinnati. And then I got lucky. Jonell Polanski was working at Kliegel Brothers back in the day. We're talking, 1974,
Yep.
and She came to Cleveland, came to Cincinnati because we were doing a company on the Showboat Majestic, and we were moving company to the Netherland Hilton Hotel for the Southeast Theater Conference. And the Kliegel rep, Sheldon Storr, at the time, brought her in, and I was the lighting designer, and she was my board op. And she
Okay.
brought a Kliegel Q-Level 2000, a brand new, newfangled memory system
Yeah. Woo.
to run that show, and it was great. And she asked me, "Well, what are you going to do when you're done?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure. I might." My father was acting in summer theater at Kenley Players in Warren, Ohio, and they did the circuit. Kenley did the circuit, and he brought in star power. People like back in the day, Paul Lynde and Florence Henderson, and et cetera. And and he would do this circuit between Warren, Dayton, Cincinnati, and sometimes Flint, Michigan, and sometimes down in Florida too. He was an impresario, very, very interesting and colorful guy.
Right.
Anyway, I thought, well, maybe I could do technical work for Kenley. I thought my dad might be able to help me out there because he knew Kenley pretty well. He'd been a character actor for Kenley for many years in the summer. Before that, he was at Music Carnival in Cleveland, which was run by Johnny Price, another impresario kind of person, a producer. Anyway, none of that worked out. And so Jonelle said to me, "Why don't you come to New York and come to work for Kliegel?" So she arranged for me to have an interview with Joel Rubin. And he's my second mentor that I mentioned, I think, in the
Yeah.
information I provided. And he
Yeah.
was amazing, hard to work for, had a big ego, but deserved that ego, to be honest. He was very
Yeah.
knowledgeable. He's the best salesperson I have ever witnessed. He was unbelievable. Of course, he just passed away several months ago now, but
Yeah.
what a great person, and so useful, so knowledgeable. He would he had this group of people, and he knew what our strengths and weaknesses were. So he'd point, "Vincent, you're going to go down to Florida and work with Ralph Schnaylock, our rep down there. Or Jim McHugh, you're going to go here. Or Mike Connell, you're going to go over here." Back in those days, it was really interesting to work for Dr. Joel.
Yeah.
He was amazing. And Kliegel at the time, they were number one. This was before ETC was born.
Yeah. Yeah.
They came along in 1975, and of course stole everybody's hearts because Fred Foster, knew what he was doing, and he created marketing that really worked, and he created good
Yeah.
products, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, working at Kliegel was great, and then I worked at Colortran for Bob Benson. He was also just a spectacular leader. Became a consultant eventually, but he ran the eastern half of the United States for Colortran. So I was one of his salespeople, and then I went to work for Bill Liento at Strand Lighting, and eventually hatched the idea of starting my own business and coming back to Cleveland.
But it's interesting though, because you went to school, you got your master's degree, you came out, you were a lighting designer. How or why the transition into becoming a sales guy, or was that just monetizing, what you knew you wanted to be a part of? It was just a
Well,
way to make money.
I'll tell you a story about that. So when I went to New York, I thought my ship had sailed in as from a lighting design standpoint. And,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to work for Kliegel almost like being a lighting designer. Instead of having to work as a waiter somewhere, in New York, I could be
Yeah.
in the lighting business. What
Yeah.
could be better? And
Yeah.
so I tried to learn as much as I could. I got involved with video lighting. I wanted to learn more about that side, not just theatrical lighting. I did some great stuff. I lit some ballet companies, not big, well-known companies like American Ballet Theater, but smaller regional stuff, in the New York area. And I did
Mm-hmm.
some work with CBS, just again assisting the lighting designer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when I went to work for Kliegel, so Joel interviews me. We finish the interview. He offers me a job, tells me when I need to report, says to me, "Okay, we're in April or first part of May. The first thing I want you to do is come to New York to the USITT conference, and you must join USITT." So
Uh,
that was his first commandment. You must join USITT. And then he says to me, let's see now, Vincent, let's see, do you know Larry Vincent? I said, well, that's my father. He said, oh,
Wow.
I worked with your father and mother at Kane Park in Cleveland. He was from Cleveland originally. He says, I worked with your mother and dad at Kane Park. He was the lighting designer there, and my
That's
mom and dad
crazy.
were acting at Kane Park. And so he got to know them.
That is nuts.
And so this was after he had already hired me. So I thought, wow, Providence, you know?
No kidding. Yeah. Geez. Well, and I mean, I'm sure that helped you a little bit in just your relationship with him and not getting in trouble if you were 5 minutes late for a meeting.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think he
Yeah.
held pretty high standards regarding sales in particular. And
Yeah.
if there was a marketing meeting or a sales meeting, and I was in the desk, see, I took Jonelle's desk.
Oh,
She
wow.
she continued to be a lighting designer. She was always a lighting designer, well known back in the day, and she lit the St. Louis Opera, for example, and so she did a lot of work even in New York off Broadway and so forth. And so I took her desk. She moved out in May. I moved in June and took her desk. Well, it was right next to Joel. Joel sort of sat over here, and I was right next to him, right? And so I would hear all the conversations, etc. I would even hear it was an open plan office at Kliegel, and
Mm,
John Kliegel the third, nice guy, by the way, but I think he was quite happy to have Joel lead sales for him.
yeah.
But he had some of his, I would say, friends, or family members that were part of the company. And you could hear the purchasing agent. I think his name was Tom Moran. I think that's right. And these conversations would get really loud. And the next thing you'd hear is the phone going wham right off the wall. He'd throw the
Oh,
phone against the
Jesus.
wall.
Well, do you know Tim Brennan? I've seen him do that about 25 times.
Well, yes,
Yeah,
yes. But those days at Kliegel that was a real learning experience. And then the
I
same
bet.
thing, reason I mentioned Marshall Spiller at Strand is, Marshall used to run quotations for them, for Bill Liento. And
Yeah.
Marshall was a real stickler. I mean, you had to do things a certain way. And I worked for him initially. And so it was good because he taught me a lot about how to put quotations together and how important they were. And he worked also, we worked with Marcia Madeira, who was a lighting designer, still is a lighting designer, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to this
Yep.
day, off Broadway stuff and so forth, and musicals, etc. And boy, we all of us grew up together during that time period and just learned a ton from people like Joel and then Marshall Spiller and Bill Liento. Bill was, I used to have a sign on my desk. I loved Bill, and he was very knowledgeable and very helpful. But I had a little sign that said, "My mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts." And that was to remind me that's how Bill worked. It's just
Mm,
how he worked. He
yeah.
was he was an A type personality, way 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 up to the top, but very knowledgeable, very good in sales. But Joel Rubin, he was the quintessential combination of, A, B, C, D. He really was. He was so excellent with customers,
Yeah.
just amazing. Anyway, so
Yeah.
those were my days at Strand, and then it was very helpful to work with people like Bill and Marshall Spiller and so forth
Yeah.
because that helped me figure out how I might be able to start my own business.
Well,
And
and what drove you to do that though? Like where did the inspiration or idea? Why did you decide that there needed to be a Vincent Lighting Systems?
well, let's put it this way. I knew early on, when I was about 6 months in at Kliegel Brothers, that I couldn't work for someone else. That at some
Oh,
point in time, I would need to start my own company. And I knew I needed to learn more. And so I hatched this whole idea of working for Kliegel, working for Colortran, and then working for Strand.
that's
Because
interesting.
at that time period, that was a great way to learn. I call it getting my PhD.
Uh, well, and I seem to recall looking at when I was looking through the notes before recording this that you spent like almost the exact amount of time at each of those three companies. So it looked like
Correct.
it was a plan. Like you had
Correct.
that whole thing mapped out.
Yeah, I
That's
tried not to
interesting.
burn any bridges as I went
Yeah.
along, of course. That's important because,
Yeah.
at some point, if you're going to start a dealership company somewhere, um, and I did
You
it,
need product.
well, you need product, but I did it the easy way. When I started my business, it was called Paul Vincent Associates, and we were a manufacturer's rep for Strand.
Okay.
And that was easy to do because they needed a new rep in Ohio.
Yeah. Good
And I
timing.
understood what they needed to do and what they would want me to do as the rep. And
Mm-hmm.
so I worked together with Sam Sircone. He was the rep in Pittsburgh. I was the rep in Cleveland. And he had his business and I had my business. And eventually, after a few years, we put those businesses together and created Sircone Vincent Associates. And that lasted for
Oh,
5 years. And we did very well. Sam was also way up on the chart, so to speak,
yeah.
very good in sales, very strong in sales. He runs a company called Brightline now, manufacturer of video and film lighting products. And
Mm-hmm.
Vincent Lighting became one of his key dealers actually in back in the day, so to speak.
Interesting.
And he and I, we are good friends. We're different. I'm much more geared towards operations, and he was geared towards sales. So we made a good team. And
Yeah.
luckily, I was in Cleveland. He was in Pittsburgh. If we were in the same city, we'd have probably killed each other.
Yeah, it works. It works like that
Yeah,
often.
because he wouldn't have been able to tolerate me after a while. He
Yeah.
told me that.
Yeah.
That's what happened. At the end of 4 years, he said, well, we were 50-50 partners. And he said, well, I don't want to partner anymore. I want to be a 60% owner. And I said, well, I don't want to be your employee. So therefore, we're going to split this up. And we both got good attorneys. We spent the time needed to create a situation where we both left each other alone. He took his part, I took my part, and the rest is history, so
That's
to
a very
speak.
civilized way to handle it.
It was definitely the right thing to do. It was good for
So
both of us.
you just basically backed out and went back to being a rep. You were
Well,
still a manufacturer's rep.
at that time, because we had created, there was still Paul Vincent Associates out there as a separate little company, and there were still
Right.
Sircone and Associates out there, his little rep company. We created Sircone Vincent as the dealer, as a distributor
Oh,
of all
that
these
was the.
products.
Oh, I see.
Right. And
I
we did
see.
that in 1981. And then we created another company called Performance Lighting and Production Services. That became the rental company.
Okay.
Okay. And eventually he sold. In other words, when I was on the banking agreement when we got our first loan in order to buy all the equipment that we needed, because it was mostly located in Pittsburgh at the time when we first started that, it was geared towards the commercial video and film marketplace.
I
So
see.
we had a grip truck. We had quite a nice package from Matthews. We had a generator, film style generator, etc. And a complete HMI package back in the day, etc. And I think we probably spent $250,000 or something like that, which back then was quite a bit of
Yeah,
money.
bunch.
And we went to, I think it may have been Mellon Bank, may have been our first bank, I think, if I recall correctly. Anyway, and we were able to get a good loan back in that time period, and we built that business up. And eventually, when I exited, what I got out of the deal was I got off the debt, so that was good,
Mm-hmm. That's
and I got
helpful.
all the theatrical equipment. Not that there was
Oh,
much, but there was enough to get me
yeah.
started.
Yeah.
Maybe $60,000-$70,000 worth of theater lighting equipment. And of course,
Right.
Sam kept all of the video and film side, the grip truck, etc. And there was
Yeah.
another guy who was a partner with us in performance lighting and production services, a guy named Jim Forrester. He's not on the planet anymore. He was a great guy, very knowledgeable, very hardworking. And he was a well-known gaffer in the
Okay.
Pittsburgh marketplace. And he did work all over Pennsylvania, Ohio, etc. He was very well known. He was very helpful in helping us create a really good business because his
Yeah.
grip truck, his little grip truck that he had, came into the fold as well. And that was important to have small stuff and big stuff.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
needed both, no question about it. So anyway,
So
very
this
successful.
was 1981. You're saying though when you guys split up?
Well, no. What
Oh,
happened was we put it together at USITT. That was our coming out party, so to speak, at USITT in Cleveland on April 1st of 1981.
Okay.
At USITT. And then we built from there. We had actually, our official start date was at the end of 1980. So in January of 1981, we began Sircone Vincent Associates, but we didn't announce it to the public in any big way until April 1st. And that was always we always used April 1st as our original date that Sircone Vincent was founded.
Was there ever an argument over Vincent Sircone?
No.
Was
no,
there
I
a
had
coin
no
flip or anything?
No,
Nobody had to pick up a dinner bill?
He knew that his name would need to be first. He needed that, and that was fine.
Yeah.
I had and he deserved it. It was fine.
Yeah.
He was the better salesperson at that point in time, especially for that marketplace, meaning for the video and the commercial video and film marketplace.
Right.
He knew that marketplace really well. He had worked in Pittsburgh for companies in that business. He got his degree in communications from Bowling Green State University. He had the knowledge base. So I would help him on theater and architectural lighting, and he would help me on video lighting and so forth. And that's how it is we came together and eventually created Sircone Vincent Associates. At a certain point in time, it became clear that we were creating confusion in the marketplace because there was Sircone and Associates, Paul Vincent Associates, Sircone Vincent, who were we, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually we merged all of it into one company. It all came into Sircone Vincent. And that did very well for 4 years. And about, I think around 1983 is when we created Performance Lighting and Production Services and got officially into the rental business.
So that was the rental side of the business, and Sircone Vincent was the sales side.
Yes, basically.
And distribution. Yeah,
yes,
got it.
Yes, that's right. And we were both, the three of us, Jim Forrester, Sam, and I were partners in Performance Lighting and Production Services.
Okay.
And then when we went our separate ways, Sam and Jim continued Performance Lighting and Production Services as a separate company. And then he reinstituted, so to speak, he created, in fact, an umbrella company called The Performance Group. That was Sam's company, and he put everything into The Performance Group. And then I kept everything that was in Cleveland, the people that we had, any of the theatrical equipment that we owned moved up to Cleveland. And then I started Vincent Lighting Systems on January 1st of 1986.
Okay,
it's funny. The employee and Sam's brother Jody worked for me.
Weird.
And he was great. I love Jody. He did a great job. And so he stayed with me after a while. He originally went to work for Sam for about a year or so, and then he rang me up one day and said, "By the way, you had talked to me about working for you. What do you think?" And so,
wow.
And so I brought him to work for me, and that's what he wanted to do. So it worked out fine. And I reached out to the employee team, and I asked the original group, I think there were 5 of us. I quickly hired a 6th because I brought in a really good accounting person, Joni Roker, who ultimately became our vice president of finance over time. And John Seaman was our technical person. Our approach basically was, we had an outside salesperson who was supported by an inside administrative person and an inside technical person. And if you break that down at Vincent Lighting Systems, even to this day, now called VLS, even to this day, you find that same team approach. And I think you find a similar approach. There's nothing new about that. You know that in your day as a salesperson, you had to have good inside support.
No, and I've always liked that sort of pod structure, you know, and High End did it really well too. When I went to High End for a short period of time in the late 90s, they had a similar thing where you had your own finance person and your own inside person, and you had your little group, and you didn't have to contact people in finance to get anything done. They did it.
Yeah.
So
that worked very well. And anyway, we went on from there. 1986, the team said, "Well, you're well known in the industry. We should call this Vincent Lighting Systems."
Hmm.
And so, okay, that wasn't my decision. That was a
Yeah.
group decision. So that's what
Wow.
we did. And eventually, after another many years in the business, we opened up the Pittsburgh office. Jody ran the Pittsburgh office originally. Walt Weber, who had been with me for many years, including the Sir Cone Vincent days, he opened up the Cincinnati office for us. And
I remember
eventually
Walt.
we opened a Columbus sales office, not a full rental office, but a sales office. And eventually we created a sales office in Michigan together with Glenn Becker at Grand Stage back in the day.
Interesting. Huh.
So
Yeah.
we covered the state of Michigan, but it was a partnership with Grand Stage Company in the early days.
Well, the name, the Vincent Lighting name, seems to have stuck.
Yeah.
It lasted an awful long time and was quite a successful company.
Well,
You
hopefully
know,
it's stuck without hurting anybody.
yeah, I want to get into, the not only the sale of the company and how, what that did to you as a human and how you got through the process and stuff. Because I know, especially when you've built a company with your own hands and you've put blood, sweat, and tears into it for so many years, and where everything is on every shelf, and how everything operates in the business, it's hard to hand over the keys to somebody else. But the other thing I find, and you might have some input on this, is most of our industry has no succession plan. And I know way, way too many business owners right now who are in their mid to late 60s and have zero succession plan. And that's a scary thought, a
It,
very scary thought.
it is a scary thought. And I think one of the reasons for that is many of us in the lighting industry don't come from a business background. We come from a lighting background. And
Right.
so without the business background, there are certain things we have to learn the hard way. And I
Yeah.
would say that certainly happened in my case as well. And I say that, I sold the business to private equity in 2017, but that took 10 years.
Yeah.
That didn't happen right away. I knew early on that I had a small, really, as far as industry standards are concerned, or business standards, if you will, I had a small, privately held company, which would
Hmm.
be very difficult to transition to new management. So
Yeah.
the first thing I did was I asked my kids. I wanted to see if they were interested. I have two daughters and a son, and they did work for the company, but as much or as little as they wanted to. I never had this dream that, they would take over the business, et cetera, et cetera. That was up to them. I always said to
Yeah.
them, find something you love to do and get somebody to pay you for it. Make sure you do both. And
Yeah.
so they've
It's a
been
good point.
fine.
That's a good lesson right there.
It
That's
is,
a good
and,
one.
and they've been fine on their own, but I went to my kids twice over various years to see if they were interested, and they were not, and they were doing
Yeah.
fine in their respective work that they were doing, and still to this day, they're doing just fine. So they were not interested. Then I went to my managers to see if the managers would like to invest, and the problem was my basic team, Chris Schick that ran the rental side, Joni
Yeah.
Roker who ran finance, and John Seaman who sort of ran the technical end. He ended up buying. We had started another company by then called Future Light,
Yeah.
and
I
Future
remember that.
Light became, in a sense, at times in conflict with Vincent Lighting. By that I mean there were other dealers out there across the country who would have viewed Future Light as a competitor because they view Vincent Lighting as a competitor, and they knew that I owned both companies,
Yeah.
and so eventually I sold that company to John Seaman, which was good. I think it was good for him. He still has that company. It was good for him. We had various products and so forth that we had created, some which we had invented from the rental team, some products that worked there that worked really well, some that came from Jody on the video side.
Hmm.
And then the original product which actually came from Van Phillips at Jones and Phillips. He
Interesting.
was looking for someone to build an orchestra shell lighting fixture. This is well before LED, okay?
Yeah.
So he wanted someone to build an orchestra lighting fixture that would fit in the orchestra panel, and the reflector would automatically adjust to be parallel with the floor. Okay, so we
Very specific need.
very specific.
Yeah.
That's what we started with. We call it the Future Light 1000, and we started with that way back in the day. That was our first product, and then we created other
Wow.
products and eventually sold the business to John, and he still owns it as Future Light. And there's
Wow.
no competitive worries because that's what he owns. That's the business
Yeah.
that he owns. And
Yeah.
and he was the kind of individual, just to be honest about it, he was the kind of individual that in some ways was better off being on his own
Yeah.
rather than being part of an organization. He would drive
I
people crazy.
understand that as well as anyone could.
He,
Trust me.
he became our operations manager, and at times could be, because he was so analytical, at times he could be a real roadblock. And
Yeah.
because you know that can happen in businesses.
Of course.
And so
Of course.
we use that as his nice exit strategy that he bought Future Light. But he and I are still friends to this day. I greatly respect him. You know, I'm very pleased to have worked with him for so many years.
Yeah.
And he was the
John's
original.
a good guy.
He was the original. When the first three people that back in the day were myself as a salesperson, Marty Donovan as the administrative person, who was the first person I had hired, and John Seaman, who was the second person I had hired. So he was the technical person, Marty was the administrative person, and I was the sales guy.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting.
So, anyway, the original management team was close to my age, and so when I thought about the idea of pursuing them to become owners of the business, they just did not want to take on the risk. So that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Then, because we're in the state of Ohio, and Ohio is a good place to do an ESOP, I thought about creating an ESOP. And Kent State University has an incubator program.
For people who don't know what that means.
ESOP, sorry, employee.
I know what it is, but
an employee-owned company, basically, where the employees have stock in the company, basically. So they have an equity stake in the future of the company.
Yep.
And when you do an ESOP, you have to create the ESOP itself. Usually that gets funded by the bank because usually most companies don't have enough cash. So you fund the ESOP. Well, you got to pay that loan back. Okay. The other problem is once the employees become owners and they get vested, they want out. And if a lot of the employees, because I had people that had worked for me for 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So you got a lot of people. I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? In order to have an ESOP, to be honest, to have an ESOP, you got to be doing this.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be doing this. And we know what the lighting business is like. There's a lot of this. There's not a lot of this. Okay.
Yeah.
You could take ETC as a good example of this. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Manufacturer that had it going, so to speak.
Yeah.
But boy, on the dealership rental house side, it's difficult to make that happen. Right.
Well, and on the manufacturer side as well. I mean, you know, look at, you know, the job ahead of Grainer right now. Like he's got his hands full.
Yeah.
You know, it's
no question.
It's not an easy world out there. Even moving light manufacturers, they've had a pretty good run since COVID opened back up. But, you know, there's already sort of chinks in that armor starting to appear as well.
Right. So it's hard to create an ESOP. Companies have done it. ETC did it. Barbizon did it, I believe. They were big enough to be able to do that. I was not big enough. Mm-hmm. So 2 times I tried to create an ESOP. And finally, at the end of it all, after studying it all and so forth, I said, no, this is not going to work. And so I went out, I got a business valuation done, and I went out to the capital markets, if you will, and to other markets. I hired an investment banker, as they're called. Yep. Never understood that name. Why are they called investment bankers?
Doesn't make much sense.
Okay, so they're really business brokers. And so he did a great job. The guy that I worked with did a really, really fine job. And he put me out there to probably 400 potential people. We created a data room. We give them access to the data room, those that were really interested in looking at it. We put our financials in there, and we didn't identify the company at the time. Instead, we just laid out a sort of an 8-page teaser, as it's called. And then we created a book.
Well,
ultimately.
and the reason for that, like, obviously it's very potentially harmful to a company to put a for sale sign on your front window, and your customers start getting nervous, your staff gets very nervous, your suppliers might get nervous.
Yes.
So yeah, I understand why you would do that.
But I was honest with the staff. In other words, they knew they had to know, because by now, I think 5 years had passed or so, and they knew I had tried doing the ESOP because I had involved them. See, I ran an open book managed business. I had read about that back in the day, and I really liked the idea of sharing the financials with the team, putting together in place opportunities for them through a 401k and through profit sharing to be able to get more money. Because I said straight up, I said, the pay in this business is not as high as other businesses you might find out there, be it computers, programming, whatever it might be. You can make more money elsewhere. And so I wanted to create something where the employees would be able to gain. If we did well, the employees did well. That was the whole idea. And so we were always open book managed for many years. And we actually worked with a few other companies in the business that I met through ESTA that were also open book managed companies. And so we would trade, not secrets, that's not the correct term to use, but I would partner up with businesses out on the West Coast, for example, because they didn't view me as a competitor and I didn't view them as a competitor per se. And we'd stay out of each other's way and not get into trouble. And we would benchmark with each other. And that was very useful. So eventually,
when you say open book managed, you're basically, you're sharing the deepest, darkest numbers and secrets of the business. Like, you're basically, it's like you're talking to your executive team in a sense.
Yeah, open book means you're sharing your financial results with your team, and you're creating an ownership culture without creating equity. In other words, I couldn't afford to create I wanted to create an ESOP. I thought we had the right temperature. We had the right out of values. All of those things were right. But economically, we just couldn't do it. And so that's why I went out. That's why I got a valuation done. I hired the investment banker to not only look at the valuation, but then also put it out there to the marketplace, including some of the competitors in the marketplace, some of the larger companies out there that might be interested. And we heard back of the 400 he put it out to, we heard back from about 30. And that list then got narrowed down, and eventually we had 4 different people come in, and 2 made offers. One offer was ridiculous, so we didn't even, but another offer was actually not bad. Okay, so this was in 2008.
Yeah.
And what do we think happened in 2008?
Yeah.
Right?
Terrible.
I got lucky, though. That it did happen, of course, and it affected us, particularly affected the rental side of the business. But I was able to get through it with the bank. The bank stood by us. We were by that time, we had been with National City Bank for many years, but they got taken over by PNC. So it became PNC. And PNC and National City, all the way through, they treated us pretty well in terms of bankers. Right?
Yeah.
We know that bankers are very conservative, okay? And that's okay. You got to learn to work within their rules of the road if you want to be able to borrow money. And of course, to capitalize rental equipment, you're going to have to borrow money, unless you're so big that you got enough cash flow coming in that you don't. But most of the time, most companies out there, they have to borrow some money in order to capitalize this stuff. So anyway.
And it ain't getting any easier.
No. It's not getting any easier. No question about that. But PNC was always good with us. They were a good financial partner, so to speak, even though they were a bank and are a bank.
Yeah, I get it.
Anyway, so what I realized was I had been a C Corp When I created Vincent Lighting Systems, S corps didn't exist. They didn't come into effect in Ohio until about 1987 or 88. We should have elected S status, but we didn't. So we were a C corp. Well, over the years, a C corp accumulates retained earnings. And when you accumulate retained earnings, if the buyer wants to buy assets, which is the case in most instances, most companies out there, whether they're private equity or others, they want to buy assets. They don't want to buy your liabilities. They won't buy your stock, in other words.
Yeah.
If they would have bought my stock, it would have been a tax situation of capital gains, which back in the day was 15%, and then you had state at about 4% or so. And so it was reasonable, just around 20%.
Yeah.
Well, in buying assets, and you have those retained earnings that accumulate, you get a double taxation event that occurs if you're a C corp, and therefore the tax rate was about 55%. And so what wasn't such a bad deal all of a sudden became a really lousy deal.
Really bad.
So I didn't proceed. After I'd done all of that work and everything else, put everything together, worked with my team to make this happen, brought the people in, done our presentations, got some offers, all that stuff, we said no.
Wow.
It was a local
That had to be a
private
tough
equity.
decision to make,
It was
though,
a
huh?
tough decision, and I was sad to have to make that decision after we had what was really a decent offer. And I went back to them, to the private equity company at the time, and said, would you be willing to buy my stock? They were not. And I said,
Yeah.
look, I'll do everything we have to do in terms of investigating everything, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want you to get hurt with the liabilities. And I don't think we have very many. And so, no, they wouldn't do it. So that was the end of that. So I decided at that point, okay, it's now 2009. I'm just going to take a break from all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I did for about a year or so. And I went to USITT and other trade shows and just, hung out. And a few of us got together and thought maybe we could create a merger of several companies in the business. So at the time it was Magnum Companies, the son, who's a really good guy, Todd.
Yeah, I know Todd.
He's now part of Four-Wall, but at that time he would have been actually the largest shareholder because he had the most equipment. He had the majority of the cash, so to speak. Okay, because Eric and his wife had done a really good job, and Todd and his sister had done a really good job building the business, and so. And then in addition to that, it was Production Advantage up in Vermont. They would have been the smallest shareholder. It was Vincent Lighting. And then it was, they've changed their name. The folks in Milwaukee, the two brothers, the Sternkeys.
Dennis and
Craig and, oh man.
I know who you're talking about, but it's been so long since I did business with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that company still exists. Okay.
Yeah.
A main office now down in Memphis. They were going to come into this as well, and they would have been the third largest shareholder. And we were pretty far along at that point in time. And we had spent a year together working on this and putting something together. And everybody was going to come into the Vincent Lighting Systems financial and administrative and operational end of things. Basically, they would use our sales system, they would use our rental system, et cetera.
Was that because yours was considered the strongest among the group or whatever?
It was pretty robust.
Yeah.
Pretty robust. And we were pretty well organized. We had a good team of people. We had a good leadership team. We had good salespeople. And so that was agreed upon that that's what we would do. And the day before we were going to sign the agreement, Todd calls me up and he says, I'm out.
Oof.
And I think it's because his local folks, his accountant, his financial partners, his attorney, they knew they'd lose his business, right? So they convinced him that he shouldn't do this. And I'm sure also, remember, it carried the family name, so to speak. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
that was a tough decision. And I'm guessing he probably decided, I don't want to lose all of that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think he became concerned because it's Craig and Dean Sternke.
Yeah.
Dean was going to run sales, and Dean was also an A-type guy. Okay, now I felt okay with that because I had dealt with an A-type guy in Sam Sircone for many years, and
Right.
and let's face it, A-type people have advantages. They bring good things to the table if you can keep them under control. Here's what I mean by that. I don't mean control them personally. I
Yeah.
mean, as an example, Sam, back in the day, always wanted to shoot for the stars. And I would always have to say, Sam, we got to get to the moon first. If we get to the moon, we can then get to the planets. Once we get to the planets, then we can shoot for the stars. We can't shoot for the stars right now. Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's why he was tired of me holding him back.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
the same thing would have happened potentially with Dean. Dean was a very hard worker and a very good salesperson and would have really pushed the organization. And some of my people came to me and said, if you do this, I'm out.
Oh boy. Yeah.
You know,
Well, so, but what, I mean, if you're able to tell me, what was the structure of that? Like when you're merging four companies together, these are owners who basically want to sell their company.
right.
So are like, is a bank funding that transaction and then everyone's taking cash out and now there's a new entity where you might retain some ownership or some stock in it and there's a management team and a board of directors and all of those things. Is that pretty much the
All,
structure?
all of that was true, except that remember, you don't have that much cash. So people would have to take a note, right?
I see.
And the organizations would be owners of the new company. That's
I
what the
see.
deal was.
Right.
And ultimately, yes, the hope was the company would then be bigger. Then it could be sold to private equity. Then there
Right.
would be a payday for the owners. But that might be
Right.
5, 6, 10 years down the road. Now, for
Yeah.
some of the people, from my viewpoint, I was fine with that. But
Yeah.
some of the people in the room wanted to get out as soon as possible. Like the
Right.
owner of Production Advantage, Penny, I don't remember Penny's last name. Penny wanted out because her husband was the one that really owned and ran the company. It was really David Schraffenberger, who really ran the company, right? And he was the knowledge base. So he was going to be part of the team going forward. And his
Right.
team of people up there were going to be part of the team going forward. And they
I
would have
understand.
handled standard goods sales as Production Advantage always had, right?
Yeah.
That made the most sense, right? And then the folks like Dean and Craig would have handled rigging because they were already in the rigging business and they
Right.
had a place in the rigging business. So they would have handled rigging and, of course, lighting in their various locations, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a sensible deal. It all made sense,
Yes.
and obviously somebody got cold feet on the eve before or whatever,
Well,
and that blew the deal up.
the problem is the person that got the cold feet would have been the largest shareholder
The
and was
largest
bringing
one, yeah,
the largest amounts of bankable assets to the table.
yeah,
And
yeah,
therefore, I was bringing the bank in and showing my bank, PNC, here's what will happen. These are the
yeah,
assets coming in. We need you to finance this. And they were
yeah.
willing to do so. It was
Right.
fine
Without them,
until
it wasn't quite as good. Yeah,
once Magna
yeah,
pulled out, I had to go back to the other folks and say, folks, we can't bank this. I don't have a
yeah,
way of banking this. I don't have enough
yeah.
assets. You don't have enough assets.
So then ultimately fast forward and
Yeah.
and you sort of restarted the program
Well,
again.
yeah, after that didn't work, I was
Yeah,
really tired. Let me
yeah,
tell you. So I
yeah.
decided again, let's take another rest. And I just got lucky. Uh, one of the people who was going to provide mezzanine financing for the deal in 2008 called me
Mm-hmm.
up one day, just out of the blue. I was on vacation up in Michigan with my wife, and he calls me all of a sudden, and he says, "By the way, whatever happened with your deal?" And he was a pretty interesting guy because his his family, if you will, created a foundation that I think came from Murphy's Oil Soap. Okay. And so they had a lot of money in Cleveland
Yeah.
behind them. And we had done a big project that they had financed. It was at a
Okay.
local Catholic school, and we had provided the theater lighting system for them. And that's partly how they knew of us. But that
Because
family,
they'd written checks to you. They knew your name. They
well,
wrote you checks.
they wrote checks to somebody who then wrote checks to us.
Oh, I
Yes,
see. Yeah.
right.
Right.
It went through a construction manager, right?
Okay.
So anyway, but it all turned out well. It was they were very happy with the equipment. It's still working to this day. They've added to it. They're still a customer, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, he's a really good guy, and he calls me up. What happened? And I explained to him what happened. He said, "Well, that's really interesting, but I can tell you, I have 3 or 4 people that might be interested in doing this with you, because the play that I had was, you mentioned this earlier. I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, right? So I'm an old guy,
Yeah.
right? I'm part of that generation. And there are a lot of baby boomers out there that started businesses about the same time that I did, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
I identified, for the capital partner that was coming in, I identified about 20 different businesses that I thought they could pursue if they so chose to do that. And I laid it all out. I put a whole plan together of how you could basically put this group of companies together to do a roll up, in essence,
Yeah.
of smaller size dealer companies in our business. That was the idea. And so this guy calls me up and he says, you still have that plan? And I said, yes, it's just as much could be done today, just as much as it would have been done in 2008. And so,
Except
uh,
everybody's 10 years older now,
yeah,
or 8 years
oh, yeah,
older.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
correct. And so he said, well, let me introduce you to a few people. And he did. And one of them was Canterbury Capital, Bob Amjad. And there were a couple of others. I talked to all of them that he had brought forth. And as it turned out, he works for Morgan Stanley. He's been very successful. And so, and I like him a lot. He's a really good guy. So his name is Peter Carfagna. And I basically pursued this. And once again, I got about, 3 different legitimate offers. I did a valuation. If you will recall, Mike Griffith had started a company along with the gentleman that passed away recently. Oh, I forget what his partner's name was, from ETC. They
Yeah.
were both from ETC.
Yeah.
Shoot, and Mark was his name, but I don't remember his last name now. I'm sorry. Anyway, they did a valuation for me, which I thought was great because it came from within the industry. Okay, and
Yep.
and it wasn't just based on you compared to other companies out there. You know what I mean? Because how many companies in the theatrical lighting business are publicly traded companies?
Yeah.
Not very many.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wanted to be, part of the group that of the not very of the very many rather than the not very many, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yes, I do.
So anyway, uh, we did this valuation with Mark and with Mike, and and Mike also had a relationship with the folks at Four Wall, and so Four Wall was in there too. But Four Wall ultimately, at the very last end of it all, they ultimately dropped out because they viewed that, most companies that get in the rental business, they're 80% rental, right?
Yeah.
And we were really more like 60% project business, 30 or 20% products, and then the rest was rental and production, right?
Yeah.
So that wasn't a model that at the
Rental
time,
was a small part of your business.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he didn't like that. The
Hmm.
owner at the time,
Interesting.
Mr. Cannon, Mike, he didn't like
Yeah.
that very well, and I understood that. And Bill Grainer was working there at the time, so once
Yeah.
again our paths crossed. And together, he and I had sort of painted a picture together of how we might become part of Four Wall. Okay,
Yeah.
it didn't happen,
Right.
ultimately. Because again, if we were a much larger rental company, it might have been different. But we didn't
Yeah.
have enough rental assets, and I think that was their viewpoint. We were very strong in project sales, without a doubt. And to this day, still the case, same case, very strong in
Right.
project sales. So anyway, it didn't happen with them. But Canterbury Capital took an interest in the whole idea, and they were willing to buy my stock, and that's
Oh,
what
wow.
made it work,
Very
because it
helpful.
became a capital gains tax. Now, I had to retire the debt, etc. But nonetheless, they bought my stock, and I had gotten our debt down from about $1 million down to about $500,000. So that was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um, and so it made the whole equation work. And it in general terms, it worked pretty well, except I had to go to my people eventually and say, okay, we're going to be bought by this private equity company. You all need to recognize it's not Paul's world anymore. This is a financially based company. They are interested in financial performance. That'll be their number one thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
my number one. I kept reinvesting in the company. They'll,
Yeah.
at some point, they're going to want to take cash out.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what private equity is all
They
about.
don't buy companies to make them smaller
No,
or
that's
less
correct.
profitable. Yeah.
Correct. They're a little different from most private equity in that they buy and hold. So they try to
Yeah.
buy good companies and then make them better, not to spin them off right away after 5 years or 7 years.
Yeah.
Instead, they're long term
Yeah.
holders.
They want to increase earnings, not
Yeah,
necessarily the top line valuation of the
correct.
company or whatever, even though that goes up with earnings. But
That's correct.
yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
the deal we did in 2017. And it
Wow.
went through,
Congratulations.
and it was
You worked
good.
harder than anybody I know in the
Oh, yeah.
industry to sell
Yeah.
your business. That's incredible. What a story.
It was the right thing
Wow.
to do, though. There's no
Well,
question in my mind.
you know, a while ago, you said that you went to all three of your kids and said, are you interested? And you went to them twice and they said no. And what a great response in a sense, because imagine how much worse it could have been if they said yes, but meant no. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
yeah.
they answered correctly, but their heart and soul wasn't in it at all.
Okay.
And
Well,
that's my son, because my son keeps dabbling with coming into my business, but I know it's not what he loves.
yeah.
It's not
Right.
where his heart is at.
Well, I'll tell you one more story about this, because the one area that I didn't tell you, the other thing I tried to do was I decided to make an attempt to go down to the next generation of managers at Vincent Lighting. And
I
I
see.
did that. And I had a guy at the time that I had a good deal of trust in, who I thought could manage the financial side of it all for me. And he, by then, had become our vice president of finance. So he was going to be taking over for Joni, who was going to head toward retirement.
Yeah.
That was the theory. Okay. Interesting guy. One of the best people I've ever seen in terms of creating financial statements, looking at the past, but he was very audit oriented. And
Hmm.
I didn't really realize how much so at the time, but he was. So I created four other managers. I took four other younger people, younger salespeople. Some of those folks still work for the company today, but I tried to go down to the next level because they were younger, and we created a deal. The same thing happened. We had a deal. The day we're going to sign the deal, okay, this guy who was the financial guy, he was their spokesperson basically.
Yeah.
He had agreed to the deal, but that day he says, well, we're not going to do it this way. This is the way we're going to do it. Basically, they wanted me to continue because, back in those days, and even some today, most of cases in small privately held businesses, the owner has to sign for credit. You're going to sign
Yeah.
personally, right?
Yeah.
And I had signed personally, and I had gotten that responsibility over time down, from 500,000 to 250, eventually to 1.25, et
Yeah.
cetera. And eventually I got myself off. But then in the bad financial end that hit in 2008, 2009, it all
Yeah. You
reversed
build it back
itself.
up again.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had to sign again personally. But I had even got that down a little bit. not off,
Yeah.
but a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, what he said to me is, okay, we're going to do this. We got to do it as a note. And I knew it was going to be a note from the company. In other words, that the company would buy back my stock and the company would pay me out for that stock over time.
Yeah.
Okay. I was prepared for that. That was okay. But then he wanted me to back the whole deal personally. So, in other
Ugh.
words, he wanted the playground, he wanted all the toys in the playground, and he
Yeah.
wanted me to, in essence, back the financing of the
Ugh.
playground and the toys.
Yuck.
Right? And
Yuck.
I said,
What a yucky deal.
I'm selling the company. That's not how it works. And
Yeah.
he was convinced, oh no, that's how it has to work. And I said, no, 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 that's okay. This is not happening. So that was the end
Yeah.
of that. That was another one
Yeah.
I had tried.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. You literally worked harder than anybody I've ever spoken to, because I've helped some companies. I've done, like during COVID, I helped a company do a roll up. They bought 5 or 6 companies out there, and I introduced them all and helped get those deals pushed through and stuff. And, it's never easy. And, right now, if you're in a certain window, like there's a sweet spot where one of a few conglomerates will buy you. But if you happen to be outside that sweet spot, it's a whole different ball game. So, we're not going to have a ton of time, but I wanted to ask you in particular your thoughts on capital needs in this business today, and even at a larger level. So, one of the things that I constantly complain about on behalf of company owners, rental company owners, is if you go back to like the 90s, you bought an IntelliBeam for 2,500, call it $3,000. You bought an IntelliBeam. You rented it out for about $250 a week. For years, it was rented solid. And in 2 or 3 years, you could sell it for $3,500, right? More than what you paid for it. And it was such a successful model, like where you were able to buy this thing, pay for it in half a year or less, and then continue renting it out and then sell it for full value at some point. And Bob Cannon was the master of doing that very, very well. I don't think I ever saw anybody do it better. And it's where Mike Cannon learned his ropes as well. And we talk about it all the time. But today, you have a moving light that costs $10,000. You're renting it out for $200 a week, in many cases, and it never pays for itself. And they launch a new model, 1 year into you trying to pay for that light. Like, is there going to come a time when normal privately held businesses cease to exist in this industry?
Well, I think the model that you're talking about is not sustainable. There's no question about that. And I'll use an example. And I wish Bob Amjad, who's the president of Canterbury Capital, were listening to this, because I told him a similar thing, basically, because the way he was financing his deals was he would, in essence, be using the company that he just bought to help finance the deal. And what I said to him was, problem is you're tying our hands. If we have to finance the deals or other deals going forward, and you don't provide all the financing, and instead you're going to go to a bank. And what I mean by finance means those assets then are already tied up because you got
Yeah.
a bank loan in order to get those assets. Well, he wants the bank to tie up the assets again. Well, that doesn't happen, right? And
Yeah.
and he's convinced that this is a good way to finance these deals. And I'm not surprised. And of course, the one thing I will tell people about private equity, they know everything. You don't know anything in
Yep.
their mind. And that's how it was. Here I had 40 years of experience. And, and
But you don't know
once they
shite.
started doing the finances, they'd come to me each month. And we'd gotten to the rigging business by then too, right? Which was really important. We had a really good
Mm-hmm.
guy, Herman Sayre, who now works
Mm-hmm.
for ETC. But he helped us get into the rigging business. And so they would come to me every month. He and his guy Blake, they'd come to me every month and they'd say, "Okay, who are you going to lay off?" And I'd say, excuse
Jesus.
me, you just showed me the financials. So at first I'd like to absorb that information, but I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to lay anybody off. See, they
Yeah.
had hired me as president of the company, right? And
Yeah.
my thought was, well, I'll do 5 days a week, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week. Well, about a year
Yeah.
into it, after this, coming to me every month asking me who I'm going to lay off, and I'm saying no every time, I realize after a while they're going to tell me to get lost. So I'm
Yeah.
going to get myself replaced as soon as possible with someone else from this industry who has worked with private equity. And who do
Yeah.
I think of? Bill Grainer. He's the perfect guy,
The old
right?
standby.
Well,
Yeah.
but he had done so many different things in the business. He and I got to know
Right.
each other back in the day when he was with Strand Lighting back in the day. I'm talking about
Yeah.
1980,
Mm-hmm.
1981. And so he was a good guy because he had also worked for Forwall and he knew
Mm-hmm.
Michael Cannon well and he understood the world of private
He's got a
equity.
wealth of different
Yes,
knowledge from all
yes,
sorts of different aspects of
yes.
the industry.
So
Yeah.
I thought he'd be perfect. And I said I just recommended him. They interviewed him at Canterbury and they hired him and they were glad that they did and he stayed for 3 years and he did a good job and then moved on and someone else came in and took over. Didn't necessarily do a great job. Now there's a new president that's coming
Yeah.
on, and I like this guy. I think I've offered all of them. Like Bill and I, we still have a Zoom meeting every month,
Oh, wow. That's
just
cool.
because we're friends, just to say
Yeah.
hello, how you doing, how's your family, what's going
Yeah.
on, how are things at
Yeah.
Altman, all
Yeah.
that stuff, and he'll ask me the same. So
I have so many people I do the same thing with. It's
yeah,
just
it's
comparing notes on the
correct,
industry or on whatever.
correct.
Yeah.
But you're right. This method of financing. The other thing you got to keep in mind, which I know maybe you relate to, maybe you don't, I'm not sure. But remember, my company was in what I call C-level cities for the entertainment world.
Yeah.
Now, a Four-Wall or a Bash, they're in A-level cities. New
Yeah.
York, Las Vegas, LA, those are A-level cities for the entertainment business,
It's a different
okay?
business.
Yes, and then there's B cities like Chicago, Dallas. Those are Boston even though it's a smaller city than Cleveland. It's Boston is a entertainment mecca and has been for a long time. So I consider Boston a B city, okay? Or Washington D.C., etc. Those are Atlanta. That's a B,
Mm-hmm.
even now close to an A city in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Orlando,
Atlanta's
Florida,
grown.
right?
Yeah.
That's an A city, no question about it. You got Disney
Mm-hmm.
and all the other people down there, the theme parks, etc.,
Yep.
etc. I'm in B cities: Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Detroit. Detroit's a pretty big city, but it's still a C city, so to speak, for
Yeah.
the entertainment business I'm
I
talking
get it.
about.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can imagine how long it takes. Yeah, maybe you'll get that 250 a week, okay? But you're not going to get it for
Not every week.
no. No,
No.
you're going to do short-term rentals. Man, it's hard to finance equipment on a short-term rental basis.
Yep. Yeah.
You know,
Well, Paul, too, like some people I consulted on who were buying some companies, they were putting these financial models together and showing them to me. And I would say, where's the CapEx? And they'd say, what do you mean the CapEx? And I said, well, if you're going to buy a company for $5 million and they're doing, 10 million in sales or 8 million in rental revenue, you're going to need to figure out what the percentage is, and it's going to depend on the market. It could be 20% annual, 25% annual, but a percentage of that revenue is going to have to be invested back into CapEx. Well, why? Does the equipment age out? And I said, not only does it age out, but there's this whole fashion thing that happens too, where suddenly there's a better model and all the designers spec that one. And trying to explain to these people CapEx models for our industry and the fact that if you're buying a company, you have to leave enough money in play because you can't expect this company to suddenly have CapEx capital to invest out of cash flow. Because, you've taken over their bank line, you've taken all the debt's gone, or you've repurposed the debt and you now own the debt or whatever. But it's not like they suddenly have this magical cash pile that they're going to find in the backyard or something. So it's amazing that companies rolling up other businesses will expect to do that without putting CapEx in play.
That's right. If they're outside this business, they just don't see it. And you try to explain it to them, they just don't get it.
No, because the gear should last forever. And
Right.
in some cases it does. I mean, I know some rental companies out there who have IntelliBeams in their rental stock. Not very many, thank God. But, our industry is very capital intensive, very capital, and doesn't
Yes.
work the same way. Like, I know a private equity group that I consulted with a little bit who compared us to the car rental business and was showing me the financial model for car rental business. It doesn't work. It's not the same business. Like,
Right.
the way the rental works, the rate of rental that you're getting back, and then the sale price on the car is much more predictable and it's safer than our industry. Like, our industry, sometimes the sale price is 40% of the original purchase price. So you're going to lose 60% on the value when you go to resell it. It's so anyways, yeah, we
Well,
could
when you say
complain
it's
about that all
safer,
day.
it means it's bankable. And the
Correct.
problem is, in our business, it's very difficult to get the bank to give you the line of credit that you need to do CapEx in any
Yeah.
reasonable way. And
Yeah.
let's face it, even in these C cities that I talk about, we were putting 300 grand a year into capital equipment. And that's not
Yeah.
nearly as big as, say, a Broadway house, like what Production Arts probably used to do, and certainly what Bash and what Four Star back in the day used to put in.
Yeah. Very
They do
different.
more than,
Yeah.
but they could get their money out over time. They could show a business model that would work, and they got enough money that they didn't even necessarily have to depend on banking.
Banks were not that important back
Right,
then.
right,
Not like they are today.
yeah,
And then the other thing, while we're complaining about these private equity deals, the way they operate or whatever, is, I was talking to an owner recently who's looking to sell his company, and he's talking to a private equity group. And he said to me, what's it like once I sell the company? And because I'm signing on with them for 3 years, which is pretty common, right? And I said, well, you're not the boss anymore. So don't think you're going to be the boss. Like, you're going to have to ask mommy and daddy for permission for everything you do from now on. Number two, whatever they're paying for your company, they're going to pay it in cash probably, but then they're going to go finance that. They're going to go get a bank to give them their cash back. This is how these private equity groups operate. They're going to want to take their cash right back out of that deal. And now they still own the majority of the equity. The business itself is strapped with that debt. So if you have an earnout, or if you still own stock or whatever it is, just understand that whatever you're selling the business for is probably going to show up as debt on the books. If not today, very soon in the near future. And I've seen way too many deals that are structured that way. Way too many deals.
and you'll
And that's
have to pay exorbitant management fees to the private equity
exorbitant,
company.
exorbitant. And I'm not knocking private equity. It serves a purpose when you have customers who are renting thousands of moving lights and thousands of square meters of these video screens and, $3 or $4 million line array systems and stuff. Somebody's got to pay for that, and the sad thing for me is it's doing away with the Vincent Lightings of the world, the mom and pop, really great businesses that are the foundation of our industry are disappearing. And again, I'm not knocking Four Wall either. Four Wall serves a great purpose. It's a great business in many ways. And by the way, I'm sure you've heard, but it's very close to being sold. So, and this is the other thing, like, your private equity company that you sold to, Canterbury, they're a buy and hold. Most of them are not. Most of them are
Yeah.
buy, grow, flip. And they're going to want to get probably at least 3x on their money. And there are private equity groups that work really well from 0 to 100 million in value. Then there's some from 100 to 250, 250 to 500, and so on. They're different private equity groups that focus very specifically on that range. And so when you get to 250, you're getting sold to the next level of private equity group. And, it's just an asset that's changing hands and going up to the next level. And so I mean, there's a need for it, but
Well, I
I don't
find it
love it.
interesting. I find it interesting. I think you're absolutely right about that analysis. And I think that Four is owned by Odyssey. I think I could be
Yes,
right.
correct.
And
No, that's
I
correct.
think they're the number two private equity group in the country. So I don't know exactly who they're going to sell to, but maybe they're going
Yeah.
to sell to the number one private equity company. I don't know.
So, from what I understand, it started as a pretty big list, somewhere around 25 or 30 different buyers. And over a period of a year, it's been a very rough year. I've heard all kinds of things, which I won't repeat here, that some of which I know are true. But it's now down to two potential suitors and likely one. And the thing is, some of these deals get done when both parties become a little bit unhappy with the deal. Like, it's not usually one side's really happy, the other side's really unhappy, or both are really happy. They're usually both a little uncomfortable with it. And I think they're getting to that point now where it's very close. I'm hearing it should at least be announced at some point before the end of summer, and should close not that long after. And from my opinion, it needs to happen because the whole industry is holding their breath for the last year based on, just Four obviously isn't spending the capex that they normally would. That hurts the manufacturers. They're maybe not paying as fast as they normally would. Pardon me, I've got the tail end of a cold here. And that's hurting the manufacturers, customers, employees. Everybody's on hold. So it's problematic. So it needs to
Yeah.
get done. Hopefully it
Well,
closes soon.
I wish them well.
Mm.
Hope it works
I
out
mean,
for
again,
all concerned.
everybody loves to hate the big guys. Everyone loves every time PRG is going through some pain or whatever. Our industry doesn't want the big guys to crash
No,
because that
for
hurts
sure.
so many people. It gathers. It's like
Right.
a tornado. When a tornado builds, it grabs all that air around it. And that's what happens when big businesses crash, Enron and companies like that. So the Enron in our industry is PRG. And, when PRG and VER came together, that solved a lot of problems and created some other ones, And the
Sure.
same thing will happen with this four-wall thing, because they'll now have a larger private equity group behind them. They'll buy a bunch more companies. They might buy another big one. And I've already heard the rumors of who that might be. And so, yeah, I mean, again, for me, the bottom line is just that smaller companies with lots of attitude and lots of personality and character are going away and becoming sucked up by these private equity groups or just being crushed by the large companies. And I don't like it. It's kind of boring. It's making the industry more boring. So, unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about your thoughts on the future of the industry and product and all of those things. Maybe we'll have a follow-up discussion at some point in the future. Now that I know you've got all this free time, we can talk.
Well, that would be fine. You just need to
Yeah.
remember, although I try to keep up on things somewhat, I am a has-been. And
Yeah.
so
But you're a
I
smart
try to stay
has-been.
true to that.
Yeah, you're a smart has-been. You're a smart guy. You know what's going on out there. You know where we've been, where we've come from, and you're a smart guy. So I do value your opinions and stuff. So what do you do to keep busy now, other than all these boards and stuff that you're on? You used to be a
Well, I
big
mentioned
diver, right?
earlier,
A scuba diver, I think.
yeah, yeah, still do some scuba diving,
Oh,
but
do you?
that's tailing off a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
72. I'll be 73 in December, so
Yeah.
it's time to slow that down. I do my SCORE volunteer work.
Yeah.
My wife is a master gardener. She's the number one master gardener in Ashtabula County,
Didn't
one of
even
the
know there
top
was
five
such a
in the
thing.
state of Ohio. Yeah, yeah,
Sounds
it's
like some
very cool.
yummy salads are in order, though.
There are. That part is
Yeah, good.
good. And this year has been an interesting year of growth in terms of crops. The lettuce we've harvested lettuce I think three times. We've harvested kale three times. We've got tomatoes. And this is
Why
early
is that?
for
Why
Ohio.
why why is it
Well,
so different?
because it was so hot early,
Oh,
we had
I
a lot
see.
of sun. and we've had enough rain, and plus I'm her water boy, so so so
Good for
I
you.
keep up with that. In fact, if it's clouding up, I can see the clouds because this condo that I'm in is our getaway place. Most people go down to Florida, right,
Yeah.
or somewhere warm and wonderful. I love Lake Erie, so I stay up here.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like me. People are wondering why I rush away to a colder place up in the mountains. And it's because I live in
Yeah,
a really hot place on the ocean, or I don't live on the ocean, but next to the ocean in South
yeah,
Florida. And you look for the furthest thing away. But plus, I was raised here and my family are all still here and stuff. So
right,
it's a nice place to
right.
come to. But
Well, it's
good
nice
for you,
spending
man.
this time with you.
And you as well. Very nice catching up. I haven't seen you in a while at shows and stuff. And so it's nice to see you and talk to you and hear a lot about your story that I didn't know. So I appreciate you sharing it.
My pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful day.
And you, Paul, and take care of yourself.